Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Simple Living High Thinking, where we deconstruct, review Tukaram Prabhu's Friday night Gita class. I'm joined by Tadeo Souza. Hi, Tadeo. How are you?
Kim.
And we went through chapter 14 in the last episode. And today we're going to review one of the shortest chapters in the Gita, which is chapter 15. So what context would you like to give for the chapter today?
I don't think this chapter necessitates a context. It's pretty much a chapter of its own. There is a trend about Krishna, us, our position, but this chapter itself starts by painting an analogy of a big banyan tree, right? And so again, I don't think there is a context here. How about you, Kim? Do you think there's a context that this chapter fits in nicely with 14 or 13?
No, I think you could just probably dive right in and start reading text one and not need a lot of background, like you said. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes, I agree with that. Just wanted to confirm with you, make sure I didn't miss anything. And so the chapter starts by Krishna painting an analogy about a banyan tree, which is a really big tree. Banyan trees are usually really, really big, which is appropriate because what Krishna is doing here, he's trying to send a message to us that the material world in which we live is nothing but a reflection of the spiritual world. There are many implications about that. Number one is that we can imagine that all the variegatedness, all the different relationships, all the different individuality that we experience here in the material world, they also exist there in the spiritual world. And there are similarities and big differences between the two. And this analogy is interesting because this big banyan tree is upside down so that the roots are at the top, implying something that is above. In this case, it would be the spiritual world. And then the branches and the leaves of this big, huge banyan tree is downwards, implying the material realm, the material existence where we are. And so if we think about the roots of the tree, we understand that all the substance that is needed in order to maintain the branches and the leaves of the tree comes from the root. That's where the energy is. The energy to develop and sustain the tree is coming from the root. And so because it is upside down, the root in this case is the spiritual world. And all the, let's say, universes and planets and all the energy that we see here truly comes from the spiritual world. And in that sense, it is a mirror. And so a big implication of this, to my experience, is that we have good and not so good relationships in the material world. So what I mean by that is, we can think about our beloved friends and family members and so on, and that is good. That gives us good thoughts. Oh, hopefully is good. Lots of family drama is out there. I'm not unfamiliar with it myself. And so, but anyways, we strive to make it as good as possible. And we can think about dear friends and so on. But inevitable, and unfortunately, there are also bad relationships that will leave a bad taste in our mouth. Again, within family members or beloved friends, intimate relationships, and so on, that break and they leave a really big bad taste in our minds and in our mouth as well, in our tongues, right? And one may think, well, if the spiritual world is like here, then when I make it there, if I take this endeavor of spirituality and I transcend the material existence and I am back to my spiritual existence, so it's going to be a bunch of people there also, and a bunch of potential good and bad relationships, a bunch of frustrations and disappointments about relationships that used to be good but now are bad. So is the spiritual world like the material world in that sense as well? So that's a question that I had asked myself a lot. What are your thoughts on that, Kim? Like, if we were, let's say, somebody who is starting their spiritual endeavors and they are very frustrated in their material existence due to broken relationships. And then here we come and we say that, hey, when you make it to the spiritual world, it's just like here. There's going to be a bunch of people there and Krishna is there. And how does that sound to you personally? And what do you think that somebody who is starting out their spiritual path would hear when they hear this statement?
Yeah, I would think a lot of worry. Like, what am I doing all this work on self-actualization for if nothing's much is going to change? For someone who was didn't understand what an intimate relationship with Krishna would even begin to look like, it could easily go down the path of, well, if it's mirrored, then I'll just go with what's safe, what's in the moment for me. Okay, this sense pleasure over here or over there. So I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've had so many questions about this unanswered. And I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on this, because Tukaram Prabhu has touched on it in various classes, additional classes to his Gita class, where he's spoken of, yes, once you're around such an attractive person like Krishna, you can't describe it, but you just want to spend all their time around him. You want to spend your time serving him, seeing, hoping for a glimpse of him. And I can understand that. And what I learned early on when I first started coming to the temple was the importance of being able to resolve conflict, being able to forgive, being able to be assertive, and all these things that were so challenging for me. I understood the importance of working that out here while I'm this materialistic earthly human, because to some degree, those sorts of dynamics, I imagine, will also be in heaven or Goloka, or going back to Godhead. So yeah, I'd love for you to correct that or give your input on that.
Well, I'll do my best to repeat what Krishna is saying here.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is more or less the theme in my perception of this chapter. All the ways in which there are similarities between the spiritual existence and the material existence. A big one being that everything here is a reflection of there, and that truly the substance of what we have here is coming from there, is coming from the spiritual world. And so, on the other hand, there is also, Krishna spends a lot of time in this chapter also elaborating on how things are different. And that's how I think this chapter is so dynamic. It tells us how it is the same, or let's say similar, but then also it distinguishes the two. And so let's go back to this idea of relationships, which is a challenge, right? We want to have good relationships, but we end up having bad relationships. What happened? We had the best of intentions with family members, romantic relationships, but then they're broken. Like, when will that end, right? We don't want that anymore. And so the way in which is different in the spiritual world, and the reason why we don't have to fear that these bad experiences will take place there too, is because Krishna is there and Krishna is not here, in one sense, meaning our sense perception, our eyes cannot see Krishna, our ear cannot hear Krishna, right? We cannot smell Krishna's fragrance here. So in that sense, Krishna is not here. He's hidden from our sense perception. But in the spiritual world, Krishna is actually present, and due to our purified existence in the spiritual world. We are able to actually see and interact with Krishna. And the reason why this is very important and it makes a big difference is because everybody's ultimately and completely and utterly attracted to Krishna in the spiritual world. Everybody's love and effort and dedication is towards Krishna. And that works. If there's one center where everybody else is focused on, then there's harmony between everything and everybody, because everybody is working towards the same goal, which is to love and please Krishna. And so we are helping one another achieve that same goal. And this is extremely powerful. And it happens here in our material world all of the time. And in fact, it is such a powerful and deep principle that we can see it happening. If this principle exists, or let me say it again, anywhere where this principle has been established in the material world, there is harmony and there is victory. And places where this principle is not set, then there's a lot of chaos and confusion. So here's what I mean by that. Let's think about very powerful corporations such as Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and Google and so on, Nike, etc. These corporations are so big and there are thousands and thousands of people working for them. However, they're not whimsical. They're all working for that one mission statement that that company has and enforces throughout the entire organization. And as long as you buy into that vision, as long as your goal is aligned with that one goal, and then there's that one, let's say, CEO who directs the company and everybody follows that person, everybody agrees that this is everybody's common goal, then you can have thousands and thousands of people working in harmony. And those companies are very, very prosperous. But that principle is there. There's that one thing that everybody accepts and everybody works together towards that one thing, that one mission. In the spiritual world, that one thing that everybody agrees to and works for is Krishna. And you can actually see him and you can interact with him. And so we can think of the spiritual world as a huge harmonious company, very profitable company that is doing really, really well because its leader is Krishna and everybody's following. And so in that sense, the spiritual world is very, very different. And that is why we can feel confident and look forward to an existence there with many, many people, because those relationships are all harmonious because the goal is the same, is to please and love Krishna.
I really like that point of everyone having the same focus and having that focus run deeply. You know, here in our life on earth, I, meet people who say, oh, I really want to do this for that person. I really want to be involved in this group. But when push comes to shove, they may flake out a lot, or they may only want to help out for 15 minutes or something like that. So it seems that the intention doesn't really run that deeply. And so I can see how the intention to serve Krishna or have that central focus would need to be at an authentic, deep level. And of course, that's not even the realm of my pay grade. And I'm so glad it's not. So yeah, that clarifies a lot for me.
Yeah, and something else that comes along with this understanding or this realization is that the unhealthy competition is eliminated, because here in our material existence, in order for me to succeed, you have to fail, right? Like we're directly competing against one another. One person's success is another person's failure. And that causes a lot of anger and anxiety and frustration and unhealthy competition. But in this existence in the spiritual world, where everybody has the same focus. I like that you use the word focus, that captures better. Everybody has the same focus. Everybody has the same goal. And so in order for me to win, you don't have to lose, because if you win, I also win, because both of our objectives is to please Krishna and to love Krishna. And so if I help you, I'm not losing anything, because I'm helping you please Krishna. And my goal is to see Krishna pleased. And so there is a possibility for everybody to work together in harmony. And there is no unhealthy competition where somebody's stabbing somebody in the back, because our goal is ultimately the same. And so that's another way in which the harmony in the spiritual world runs supreme in an absolute manner, because nobody's losing. If I help you, and let's say I was not put in the center stage, I wasn't the one who did this big thing, who pleased Krishna, and I'm not getting the recognition, which in the material world is a problem. Well, I don't have that mindset in the spiritual world, because even if I was in the background helping you and you got all the glory, your glory was to please Krishna. And then now Krishna is pleased. And what I want to see is Krishna pleased. And so everybody wins at all times. And so there is very healthy and powerful, meaningful, deep collaboration, as opposed to unhealthy competition.
What a great point. Yeah, competition for sure would be a big motivator here on Earth. And it just brings to mind all the past episodes where humility has come up so frequently in the texts, and how that's such an important component to eliminating that unhealthy competition, the envy, the, oh, you lose, I win sort of mentality.
Right. And so I think that settles this potential fear, right? Well, I'm going to go to the spiritual world and encounter more of the same, more of a bunch of people frustrated with each other, competing in an unhealthy way. So yes, there are a lot of similarities between here and there, but there are some crucial differences. One main difference is that Krishna is there, available, and everyone there has the same goal, and everybody works together. So everybody wins at all times. So our relationships, they are very harmonious rather than problematic as we have them here, because here everybody's individualistic. I want to win for myself. And that's not the case there.
Yeah.
Now, another aspect of this chapter that jumps into my mind is the part of Krishna where he's all merciful, where he's all good and gives us free will, which is this. If we think about, again, the analogy of the tree, then there are many, many branches. And we can think of each of these branch or each leaf, let's say, on a big branch as a particular planet. And each branch would be a particular universe. And then when you think about a banyan tree, which is gigantic, we can imagine many, many, many universes and many, many, many planets in all of these universes represented as this tree. But the question comes, why is the tree there at all to begin with? Is that combination of free will and mercy. Krishna gives us free will. If we don't want to be with him, we can go to a place where he's not. Hence, the chaotic situation that we find here in the material world, because it's very different than in the spiritual world where Krishna is there and everybody just wants to please him. So Krishna gives us the free will to experience that. He's not going to force us to love him, but instead he's going to create this entire tree. The tree is here for us. And all these fruits that will come in the tree are meant for our taste enjoyment. The problem is, the more we eat from this tree, the more we want. And so we get more and more attached. But the tree is there nevertheless, giving me an understanding that Krishna is so kind that he understands what our desires are, and he's providing us the chance to fulfill them. He doesn't really want us to be here and enjoying these fruits of this tree. He wants us to be enjoying the fruits of the tree there in the spiritual world, which are much, much better. But he's not going to compromise our free will and keep us there stuck. So hence the tree and the fruits in the tree and our possibility to continuously go after these fruits of this tree. And we can compare these fruits of this tree to bring it closer to our understanding, to things like social status, wealth, romantic relationships, cars, all the things that we want to taste and enjoy. And so here we are enjoying them until we realize that, well, it's not really working out that well. And I want to go to where these fruits would actually satisfy me and not just leave me with a bitter taste in my mouth due to the impact of time. Because no matter how many of these fruits we get here, they please us one day, the next day they don't. And then some of them don't even please us at all. So then we are left unsatisfied. And some of these fruits may even be contaminated and polluted. And if we eat them, we may actually get sick. So that's our existence here. And once we realize that, hey, there is actually another tree in the spiritual world, which its fruits actually satisfy me, and I can go back there. And so I think a big part of this analogy here is for us to recognize that this tree is here, but the ultimate goal is to not just jump from one branch to another and eat from one fruit to another, but the goal is actually to cut down the tree. Actually, Krishna says that in the chapter itself, that our goal is to cut this tree down, you know. So the tree is here because Krishna wants to give us the opportunity to satisfy our whimsical material desires, and he won't compromise our free will. But the goal is to transcend it, and is to go back where the real tree actually exists, where the real fruits will actually satisfy us. And the fruits there are fruits of love and personal, harmonious relationships, which is really what we are after.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you brought up the point of mercy. I often look back on my life, and I came to this tradition very late in life, my 40s. And I think I don't even understand still how I took to it, so to speak. So, you know, Krishna's mercy, him wanting us to choose him of our own free will, that there's no force involved, wanting us to enjoy whatever that enjoyment may be, you know, in our elementary ignorant states in life, just being so hands off, because yeah, the ultimate goal being genuine true love, not forced. So it was a really nice point.
Right. And again, I can't help but to continuously see these parallels in this chapter about how things are different, but then how things are also similar, right? Another point that Krishna makes in this chapter is that contrary to our planet in the physical universe, where the sun is needed in order for us to have light, the planets in the spiritual world are self-luminous, and they don't need a sun to illuminate them or to provide heat and light or electricity or anything like that. And so there's that difference, right? That is very, very similar, but is also very, very different. Can you imagine like a planet that doesn't even need the sun? So it's like summertime every time. It's always luminous, and you don't need to sleep, right? And then you can just constantly act in civilized manner and enjoy true love and deep, meaningful relationships. It's a pointer of what's possible. We can think about our existence here and eliminate all that is bad, and we're practically in the spiritual world, but with Krishna in the center. you know. So I like this chapter, how it presents this analogy, and in one hand things are similar, but in another hand things are quite different. In that even here, Krishna is the ultimate source of everything, right? And in that sense, it makes it very personal. There is one text in this chapter where Krishna mentions that he is himself the energy. Like this is text 13. Krishna says, I enter into each planet, and by my energy, they stay in orbit. I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. And see, in this, when I read this text, Krishna is so close because he's entering into the planet, even though we cannot see it, we cannot see him or speak with him. He's nevertheless stating that he actually enters into each planet, and that is actually his energy that keeps all the planets in orbit. We call it gravity, but Krishna is claiming it. Is actually his energy. But then how about this? I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. This implies that the juice from vegetables comes from the moon. The moon energy supplies the juice for all vegetables. And these vegetables, when we eat them, they're so vital to our life. And so in that sense, Krishna is also so close. This banyan tree is so big, and its roots is all the way there in the spiritual world. And that can create some distance between us and Krishna. But at the same time, Krishna is right here. He enters into each planet, and he is the juice of vegetables, which is so vital to us. You know, is healthy for the human vegetarian body. And so in that sense, Krishna is also so close. And so I like this chapter where he makes things similar but different. He puts Krishna far but close. And ultimately, Krishna states, let's say, text 19, Krishna says, whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is a knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me. And so the tree is distracting. It's a big, big tree. And there are many things for us to know about this tree. This tree represents the entire material stuff, let's say. But it's impossible for us to know all of the branches, all of the leaves, all of the fruits. It takes so many lifetimes. But Krishna says, you can also know me. And if you know me, you know everything. And if you know everything, you know that this tree, its material is not as good. And then you go back to the spiritual world. And then you'll be inclined and driven towards something that is more substantial, which would be your spiritual existence. And so I like that fact that Krishna brings himself also very close and never deviating from the goal, which is to cut down the tree, know him, so that way we know everything and we go back to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the imagery of cutting down the tree. It might seem a little bit daunting to some, like me, to cut down the whole tree. But if we take it in smaller steps of, oh, I just want to cut this branch over here. I want to, quit drinking, or, oh, I want to just break through these branches over here. I want to, I don't know, not be gambling, or wherever you are in your place in life, to take it in small attainable steps, to start moving towards your goal. Yeah.
And Krishna helps. That's the beauty of a personal relationship, because we're not alone in this daunting task of cutting down the tree. It is not just us, Krishna actually will do the most. We can focus on our chanting. We can focus on refining and choosing our association. And by showing that small sincerity, Krishna does the rest. And so it is a daunting task to cut a banyan tree, but Krishna is there to help. That's the beauty of a personal relationship. We were discussing, Kim, prior to starting our recording, that you had a realization about personal and impersonal in relationship to this chapter. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, it was kind of springboarding off of Tukaram Prabhu's teachings of how this chapter really highlights, okay, Krishna's stating very directly that he is the source of everything, which has come up before, but also really emphasizing that we are always eternally separate from God. We will never become God. We will never become Krishna, one with, basically, yeah, become God. And that distinction is so important because the age-old question of, the Buddhist mentality, perhaps, of do we lose our identity? Do we become part of some energy, some one cosmic consciousness? And this really directly states that no, you will never become part of the Supreme Being. And so this idea of impersonalism and personalism, impersonalism meaning there's an energy, there's no individual identity, and personalism, where Krishna is a person, Krishna is an individual consciousness, always forever separate. And once you realize that, okay, we're not trying to become God, that there's always a separation of this person over here who loves us unconditionally and has set up our lives so that we can choose him with our free will. The result of that is bhakta, this devotion, because in order to have true love, you have to have a lover and a beloved. And so in order to have that dynamic, you have to have two individual persons, two individual personalities. So once you realize that Krishna is the source of everything, that he's always separate from you, then you start to become more devoted, that bhakta, that devotion, that love, it develops.
That's an excellent point. And I'm never tired of hearing this understanding of our tradition that God remains God and we remain who we are, spirit souls. And that is desirable because, like you mentioned so nicely, if we are all one, then there's no love because there has to be a lover and a beloved. And psychologically, I think about this, right? The possibilities here seem to be quite finite and easy to explore. So either A, we cease to exist. That's more like a Buddhist conception of nirvana, where there's nothing. Even yourself is not there. So there's nothing there. So you cease to exist. It's a tough topic because, as like traditionally speaking, most people, I would say, we never really had a chance to die and come back and see, like, do I cease to exist and then I come back again? Like, what is that like, right? We don't have that direct experience to understand what happens after death. We have faith and realizations due to our spiritual practice that we are eternal and that we never cease to exist. And so there's some kind of evidence for that here. I don't know if it's like a extremely empirical evidence, but we know that I was there when this body was 5. I was there when this body was 20, and I am here when this body is 40. Why should I cease to exist when this body is finished? So it is not, perhaps not completely logical and conclusive, but it does point to the possibility of the I not necessitating the body in order to exist, because the body changes, but I still exist. And so when death comes, it is more likely that you can continue to exist and the body finishes. So if one accepts that, then the following step would be, all right, what is that existence like? So I will still exist forever, but then I can become God. I exist, I'm there, but I am God, right? And everybody else, when they attain their perfection, will realize that they're also God. And then there's just that one God, and we are all it. And the illusion really means we perceive each other as being separate. And ultimate spiritual realization means we realize that we are God and we are all one. We are that one God. That's the impersonal aspect. Well, let's analyze that. I said, like, the options are quite finite, right? Either I exist or I don't, and after death. And if I do exist, am I by myself? Is it just me? Or is there many, as it is here? So those are the only possibilities. So they are finite. And they're easy to contemplate. Because again, if I do exist and I am by myself, what kind of existence is that? Like, due to our previous topic here in this chapter, yes, troublesome, burden relationships are really tough here in the material world. But like we mentioned, it's not like that there in the spiritual world, because there's unity. Everybody's striving for the same goal. And so psychologically speaking, due to our frustrations here in the material world, one may be inclined at first, in a superficial level, to say, hey, you know what, that's better. You mean to say that I am God, so I'm all powerful and all knowledgeable, and there's nobody there to bother me, and I get to have peace? That perhaps is more desirable. If you have been so burdened with broken relationships here, right? But if we accept that, like, no, it is possible for relationships to exist that are harmonious eternally, as we mentioned in the beginning of this recording, right? So if we accept that that's a possibility, then let's analyze that. Which one would be better? That you exist in the ultimate states of godlike being, but you're there by yourself. If you win the lottery, let me try to come up with an example here. If you win the lottery, or you do really well, you start a business and sell it, or let's say you have a lot of money and you have a beautiful, attractive body, you have a calm and controlled mind, and you have all this wealth, millions and millions of dollars and all beautiful things, but you're there alone. Maybe that is going to be okay for the first week, maybe the first month, but after a year, after 2 years, and remember, we're talking about eternity here. That's a really long time. Wouldn't it be terrible? Because you're just there by yourself. There's nobody for you to share all your attractiveness, all your wealth, all your realizations, your ideas. There's nobody there for you to share them with. And you're just there eternally by yourself. That is not attractive to me. And then the only other possibility is I do exist, and I am not the only one. I'm there. There is one who is Krishna, and I love him, and he loves me, and everybody around me, like we were discussing in the beginning of our recording, loves Krishna as well, and we are helping one another to love him and to please him, and he is pleasing us. And that goes on eternally. I think these are the only three options. Either I exist or I don't. And if I existed, I'm by myself, or there's many. And of these three, certainly existing in a perpetual state of love and peace and knowledge would be the best choice. I think if we are analyzing it sincerely and from a relatively stable state of mind, again, if our psychology has been so bombarded with broken relationships, it may be difficult to conceive of a place where infinite beings exist and everybody get along. I know, it's tough to conceive of that. But if it is possible, and these are the three choices, you either cease to exist, or you exist by yourself, or you exist in harmony with infinite beings. If you can truly assess that from a relatively healthy state of mind and consciousness, I would argue that such an analysis would lead you to conclude that the third option is the best. You exist forever in a state of harmony. And that necessitates the lover and the beloved. It cannot be impersonal. It has to be personal, and priority should be there.
Yeah. Yeah, so many of our questions can be pulled, I think, from our lives here on Earth, where, what is everyone seeking? They're seeking love. That's the ultimate goal. They're seeking harmony. Their circumstances may not set the stage for such harmonious relationships, but certainly people can conceive of the idea that harmonious relationships do exist. And so when we think of, just logically what our lives here on Earth are like, and the idea that what do all of us want to do? We want most, if we don't have mental challenges, we want to live. And so the idea that our ultimate goal as a soul beyond this life would be to not exist logically does not make sense to me. Even another logical aspect, or perhaps illogical, of the impersonalist notion of how did the one become many? To all the discussions and conversations I've heard and had myself with impersonalists, there's always a point where they might dip out and say, well, that's beyond our knowledge. Well, where they just abandon logic. And I don't believe that we need to abandon knowledge to love God. Logic was gifted to us. And I think it makes total sense that we would need it and should use it in order to understand God. So.
You made such an extraordinary point. I never thought about it that clearly as you stated, in terms of option number one, right? We cease to exist. What is it that we all have in common here? Yes, there's a very small percentage of people on the planet who are in a very dark place and wants to die, let's say. This is very, 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 very small. The vast majority of people living, animals included, that's one thing we all have in common. We all want to live. We want to live life. And I would also argue that our biggest fear, humans and animals alike, is to die, is the fear of death. And so I think these markers are relevant. I think we should consider them as we are contemplating our ultimate existence and the ultimate meaning of life and where do we go and where do we come from, these big questions. I think these pointers, these biological pointers that are shared across humans and animals alike are very relevant. We all want to live. Nobody wants to die. Why is that? Why do we all share that? No matter which country or ethnicity you're from, we share that. And so why would it be any different, right? In our after death, like we all, it comes from within us, the sense that we are eternal and that we live forever is shared between all of us. That's such a great point, Kim. Thank you for making that point.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, this was a great conversation. I love dissecting this chapter with you.
Same here, as always.
Yeah, so next week or the next episode, we will be doing chapter 16. So yeah, join us for that. And also every Friday evening, Tukaram Prabhu's Friday Night Gita class. It is live streamed on Facebook, Instagram, and I encourage you to tune in because he is a wonderful teacher and a really wonderful just person to know on a personal basis as well, outside of his classes. So, all right, thank you for joining everyone, and thank you to Dale. And I look forward to talking again next week.
Haribol.
Haribol.